great pleasure to welcome you to the 16th edition of School of Tomorrow events, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. The non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in 2000 to engage global communities in conversations that shape the future of schools and societies. I would like to thank Google for Education, the lead sponsor for SOT 2023, their partner Tech Valley, and our titanium sponsor UBL. Other key sponsors include My Backpack, MK Books, Allied Bank Limited, Habib Bank Limited, Wateen, Interwood, Franklin Covey, and Leader in Me. We also thank our SOT supporters, including Paramount Books and Nestle Pure Life, who have contributed to this year's event. Moving to our housekeeping instructions, please ensure your cell phones are silent. Please use the SOT app to scan the QR code for session Q&A and feedback. Share your thoughts on social media using the hashtags, that is, hashtags Guardians of the Future and hashtag SOT 2023. If you need assistance, our ushers are here to help you. For questions, please either use the flashcards provided by the ushers or the mobile app. The panel discussion will last for about 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes for question and answers. Well, up next, we have an important discussion on the topic Ideate, Innovate, and Initiate, moderated by Mr. Nasir Kasuri. Mr. Nasir Kasuri is the CEO of a number of companies under the Beacon House Group umbrella. This includes Beacon House International College, which provides UK-based undergraduate and postgraduate programs in Pakistan. He also heads Beacon Energy Limited, a provider of high-quality solar PV solutions, as well as Homebridge, Beacon House's first foray into fully online education. He sits on the board of Knowledge Platform, a company focused on leveraging AI and machine learning to bring quality learning to students in Pakistan, and is also the chairman of the board of Teach for Pakistan, an organization that places internees in 2-year teaching fellowships in government schools. He has done his BSc Social Sciences from the Lahore University of Management Sciences and Executive MBA from the London School of Economics, delivered in conjunction with HSE Paris and NYU Stern. Sir, we are honored to have you with us today. You are requested to join us on the stage, please. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the 16th edition of SOT events, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. As the moderator of today's panel discussion titled Ideate, Innovate, Initiate, Empowering Future Entrepreneurs, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you all to what promises to be a riveting conversation. So just a brief introduction of the panel. Rapid technological advancements and evolving business landscape create the ideal environment for a new generation of entrepreneurs. This session explores the many aspects of entrepreneurship, from the transformative power of digital assessments in promoting inclusivity, the guiding principles of cultivating leadership and life skills in educational models, to the strategic nuances of venture investments in budding tech industries. Drawing insights from global education strategies, Pakistan's burgeoning tech scene, innovative curriculum design, and the world of venture capitalism, the discussion aims to sculpt a holistic view on empowering future entrepreneurs, equipping them with the tools to ideate, innovate, and initiate. So without further ado, let me introduce you all to our distinguished panelists. We have Mr. William McIntyre. Mr. McIntyre, if you could take the stage, please. William Bill McIntyre is the Senior Vice President of Franklin Covey Education and International General Manager. For the past 12 years, Mr. McIntyre has led the expansion of Franklin Covey's international network of partners and the growth of Leader in Me schools from their humble beginnings to now over 3,200 schools outside the US. Over the past several years, he has delivered workshops, keynote speeches, and training focused on transforming education. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Faisal Aftab. Faisal, if you'll join us on stage. Faisal Aftab is a Pakistani-American having an impressive 23-year career as an executive entrepreneur and venture investor. As the founder and general partner of Zain VC, Faisal has played a pivotal role in driving the sector's growth and development. Faisal's educational background further enhances his investment acumen with an MBA from Oxford University and joint bachelor's and master's degrees from Michigan State University. Welcome, Faisal.
Thank you.
We have two panelists joining us online. Dr. J.D. LaRocque, firstly, is the president and CEO of the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, NFTE, a global nonprofit organization that provides high-quality entrepreneurship education to middle school, high school, and young adult students from under-resourced communities. Dr. LaRocque is a professor of the practice of law and policy at Northeastern University. He earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees from Harvard University and a law degree from Georgetown University. Welcome, Dr. LaRocque, to the panel. And lastly, again, online, we have Dr. Jesse Dvorak. Dr. Jesse Dvorak is a seasoned education professional with over 20 years of experience in educational leadership and innovation. Currently, Dr. Dvorak serves as the Deputy Director, Digital Products and Services at Cambridge University Press and Assessments, where she leads the digital assessment and evaluation product and services for over 10,000 schools in 160 countries around the world. So welcome to our last panelist, Dr. Jesse Dvorak. So let's start with some opening remarks, ladies and gentlemen. So just to get the conversation going, you all come from a diverse range of backgrounds with your own experiences, and I would be interested in knowing how technology has been transformative in your area of work, and in what ways it has enabled greater entrepreneurship. So perhaps we can begin with you, Faisal, and then take it from there.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be at this conference. So in my line of work, actually, it's all linked to technology because we're investing in companies that are leveraging technology to disrupt our very way of life and effectively everything we do. So what we've seen, particularly, let's say, in a place like Pakistan, to us, this age is very similar to the period in history when a partition happened and Pakistan was created. That was the Industrial Revolution, disrupting the agrarian structure of the world, where you saw people moving from farmland, labor, and moving to the industrialized age. In fact, the education system today is geared to train people from the manufacturing stage. Today in Pakistan, you've got the same opportunity where you have the information age at exponential adoption and disrupting the industrial age very rapidly. And adoption is among the 4th fastest in the world in terms of smartphone adoption and data adoption. And so for us, backing entrepreneurs in Pakistan, the 5th most populous country, producing a lot of talent, for the first time, we get to back people based on their intellect and capabilities versus asking for collateral, such as land or any hard asset. And so I think it truly is going to unlock the potential of this country.
No, absolutely. And Faisal, do you think that technology has played an important role in making that transition possible?
In terms of today?
I mean, there were startups before there was heavy use of technology also, is what I'm saying. How is today's startup, or how has technology further enabled entrepreneurs in the current context?
So it's happening in layers. So whether you look at what's happening to traditional linear media, satellite and cable, versus adoption of social media, and then having ripple effects in society in terms of the information war, per se. The same thing is playing out in terms of businesses. So the analogy I do again is when Pakistan was created and somebody realized that it needs a bank, it needs an insurance company. Similarly, now people have realized that there's a significant chunk of population online, and they need banks, e-commerce stores. And so it's going to be a fundamental shift in the way we exist.
Absolutely. And Bill,
Yes, thank you, and I'm honored to be here as well. As you know, our company is more focused on the training side and human side of helping to build leaders of the future who are often entrepreneurs. We've used technology in our process to be able to digitize training content, offer it. We were able to reach more teachers, more students, to create more learning opportunities through technology. I think you just can't avoid technology. It is what we do today, and that's why, I mean, you're in the entrepreneurial business with developing technological companies. You know, I was reading an article in Forbes magazine recently, and it mentioned what are the top 10 skills that are going to be needed in the next 10 years for future leaders and future employers. And the top one was digital literacy. So not only do we need to use technology, but we need to be able to work within it and in it. The second one was data literacy, being able to analyze data. But it was interesting, the following 8 of those 10 were all life skills. They were all skills like creativity, collaboration, leadership, time management, and those kind of skills. So my take on technology and AI in particular is it's a beautiful resource and we want to leverage it as much as possible, but in using AI and technology, we don't want to lose our humanity. And we need to make sure that we are running our lives and not technology. Technology should help us do that better and more effectively.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. LaRocque, if we can have your opening statement, please.
Yes, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be with all of you. At our organization, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, we work mostly with young people in the US and Pakistan and all around the world, and we help them to create businesses. And I think it will come to no surprise to you and to the audience that young people in particular are quite attuned to technology and are very interested in utilizing technology to become entrepreneurs. I often say that our young people tend to create businesses in 3 key categories. One of those is app-based businesses. We see young entrepreneurs all around the world really leaning into technology to leverage the internet and app-based businesses to become young entrepreneurs. Now, with the emergence of a new generation of AI, we are also seeing our young entrepreneurs really embrace ChatGPT and other formats to become entrepreneurs. So I think that the use of technology is always going to be prevalent among entrepreneurship, and in fact is a powerful enabler for entrepreneurship in countries all around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And Dr. Jesse, your perspective on how technology has potentially enabled an increase in entrepreneurship in the world.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually going to build on something that Faisal said because I think it's really key in the idea that we're in a space where we're transitioning from the Industrial Revolution towards the digital age and the digital revolution. And I think that's a really key part of where we're at in education as well. We're really trying to work to align what students need for 21st century success in a digital age. And Bill mentioned some of those skills as well and how we bring that into the classroom. And a big part of what my job is at Cambridge and what we focus on in the technology space is how do we appropriately align our assessments, our teaching and learning curriculum, and the skills and needs that students will have to bring forward to that 21st century space into the teaching and learning environment to support them as they move forward so they have those necessary skills to be entrepreneurs and lead forward.
So it's an interesting point you make. In fact, it leads me to my next question, Dr. Jesse, which perhaps I'll just start with you, because we keep talking about 21st century skills. And, we talk often, other than, digital literacy skills, about skills like communication, empathy. I wonder, what are the distinct skills that budding, aspiring entrepreneurs need to have in the 21st century, and are they really hugely different from the skills that entrepreneurs needed to have in the past. I mean, you always had to be a good communicator. You needed to be able to empathize with people and connect with them to launch a business. So I'm wondering, what are the distinctly 21st century skills that kids need to have now, and are they really different from what was required in the past?
I think to Bill's point earlier, I think that there's some that are going to be different. We talk about digital literacy and data literacy and those pieces, but I think fundamentally, a lot of the things like problem solving, critical thinking, metacognition, a lot of those pieces that we see to move forward, leadership, communication, collaboration, those are all the same, but how you engage with them, how they're used, how you are applying them, that's what tends to look different. And the need that students have to have with the comfort around technology and how technology is used to engage with those skills and apply those skills is the piece that we've had to adjust to support them to go forward in that 21st century. I don't think it's that the skills are different, but how you apply them and use them and adapt them in the workforce is what looks very different.
No, that's true. I mean, obviously, the way in which we connect and collaborate are totally different from how they were in the past, in the Industrial Revolution and before. Agreed. Faisal, as a VC, I mean, I know that VCs kind of, one of the things that VCs often talk about is, investing in the founder. So what are the skills and attributes you look for in a founder when you're investing in them?
Yeah, so, and I think education plays a huge part in this. And one of the things, I guess, from a Pakistan's perspective, we need to learn to accept failures and understand that failures, as long as people learn from it, you're going to end up, succeeding the fifth time possibly, right? So you get back up and you keep trying. The other thing is that you want to also encourage outside the box thinking and creative thinking. So many times when we're investing in founders, one of the main attributes comes down to resilience and the ability to understand, look, it's an extremely tough endeavor when you become an entrepreneur versus an employee. The chances of failure are quite high, but at the same time, if you have the tenacity to keep getting back up every time you face a problem, and so it's really assessing those skills up front. And one of the ways we do it is by seeing their past performance. So many of our founders have come from existing tech platforms like in the region, for example, Careem, which is an Uber company, Delivery Heroes, Food Panda. These were the first platforms that had entered Pakistan, and then Alibaba's Daraz. So teams, especially at the middle management layer or pseudo upper management layer, when those individuals leave and want to start a company, they have been through that tenacity and that drive to scale a tech company. And so that's the attributes we look at today in terms of where Pakistan sits. And I think in the future, what we'll be looking for, similarly as there's programs like Spark Tank, for example, in Beacon House, that's identifying talent at an early age, 13, 14. As those entrepreneurs from that pool evolve and succeed or have failures, we will then look at pools like that. And hopefully there'll be other programs like that. And so it's a continuous evolution process.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What about like a completely fresh entrepreneur who doesn't have a track record? Are there markers you look for in those people?
So I have backed. It tends to be more in highly scalable tech companies, non-operational links. So one of the youngest founders I ever backed came straight out of college from NUST, and he was building an AI company in the audio space. So yes, at least in my instances, where it comes to certain platforms, it makes sense to back people that is purely on their technical skill sets. And obviously the exit there is that he was tackling an issue in terms of your text to speech that a few companies in the world were looking to acquire. For example, Alexa and many other players. So the idea was the exit was there. But in most instances, you need some level of scaling demonstration or a track record in the past, just to mitigate the risk for us as investors. And again, we invest early stage, but there are investors, angel investors, that will take a risk across the board.
Okay, thank you. Bill, your perspective. What are the sort of skills necessary for successful entrepreneurs? And I know you have some programs. The Leader in Me program, for example. Would this be a good time to talk about that?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Faisal was saying. I would add the word grit. And I think that goes along with resilience, which you mentioned. And I think young entrepreneurs, they need to understand failure, as you said. I think we need young people with vision. And I really think this current generation, these high school students and even below, they're brilliant. And they are technologically savvy. And I read somewhere that 40% of our current youth would like to start their own business. They're very entrepreneurial minded. About 69% of them, this data said, even have an idea they would like to start. So one of the things I think we need to do to help them is give them an opportunity to learn those skills, to learn the leadership skills, which we do. That's what we try to do with schools. I think if they could find a cause, the current generation loves, they want to solve problems in the world, and they see the world with a lot of problems, and they want to find something that they can get behind. So I think something that really motivates them to change the world, those are the kind of, if I was a VC, I would be looking at that as well maybe, and I think you probably are. But we teach leadership to students, and we try to give them an opportunity to practice that in the classroom and at the university level as well. We have a platform called Leader U that addresses the skills gap, what we call it, for the life skills in college students. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Dr. LaRocque, you of course, entrepreneurship training is kind of your forte. Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about it, what sort of skills and attributes you feel are important for budding entrepreneurs, and what's your process of really teaching those skills? What is the process that you guys follow?
Yes, well, I very much agree with everything my fellow panelists have said. At the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, we've actually identified 8 critical skills that we believe are particularly important for young entrepreneurs. Some of them are things that we talk about all the time, such as critical thinking and communication and collaboration. But then other skills are things that we believe are particularly useful for entrepreneurs, such as flexibility and adaptability, comfort with risk, because being an entrepreneur is a risky proposition, initiative and self-reliance, future orientation, the ability to spot opportunities, and of course, as Bill just said, creativity and innovation. And I think the big insight that we try to bring to schools and educators is that these things can actually all be taught. Many people don't believe that something like creativity is something that can be developed, a skill that can be developed. Many people believe it's something inherent. You either have it or you don't. We don't believe that. We think, like any other skill, it's something that can be cultivated and nurtured. So when we work with young people in schools around the world, we teach their teachers and them to really lean into the development of those skills, believe that they can foster those skills and develop them over time, and then bring them together and apply them in the service of their emerging business.
Excellent. And the model you have, is this an online program, or is it a physical program that you guys do?
It's both. It's typically a physical program, but it can be delivered online. Our organization provides the curriculum and the training for educators, and the educators then typically deliver the program as a formal class within the school day. And so what we've learned is that in order to truly cultivate these skills, it needs to be done rigorously and seriously. And so it's often not enough to have a short class or something outside of school. Really embedding it in school is the best way to do it. But of course, different people work in different settings, and so we offer our model flexibly to accommodate for those different circumstances as well.
Fantastic. And Bill, can you maybe walk us through, the Leader in Me program a little bit? How does it work? It seems like a huge part of what Franklin Covey does. And so what are some of the salient features, and how do you go about really bringing out those leadership qualities in students?
Well, the Leader in Me as a process is a school transformation model, and we focus on 3 areas: leadership, culture, and academics. So we help the teachers model and teach leadership skills to the students. And these are the life skills that we're talking about. When I say leadership, I mean those life skills. We also build a culture in the school of leadership, where children want to be there. The relationships between teachers, students, parents is very collaborative and positive. And we find that by focusing on those leadership skills and building that culture, there's a positive impact on academics. So we focus on the paradigms, how teachers see the students. We try to identify their genius, what they're good at, and then the teachers try to help them develop those specific talents and gifts that they're good at. We believe every child is a leader, and we treat them that way. And so we try to give them leadership opportunities. Every child in a Leader in Me school receives a leadership role, and they're responsible for leading some project or something, which is great for entrepreneurship. So we do this in schools. We have a great new feature I'll just mention. It's called Global Connect, and I think this is really relevant in education today because we're such a global society, and digital technology is bringing the world closer together. So we have a process where students in Leader in Me schools around the world can connect with other classrooms and other students around the world also studying leadership. And recently we had students from 8 countries collaborate, and they developed several service projects. Service learning is another great aspect that we need to probably embed more in education. And they did these service projects together to practice and demonstrate their leadership. So as was mentioned by the other panelists, you can teach these skills. What we try to focus on in Leader in Me schools is to help them practice those skills and actually implement them and get that experience. And we're dealing with little children all the way through high school. So, yeah.
And is the program, is it sort of a separate class that takes place? Do you need to make room for it in the schedule, or is it kind of embedded into the existing curriculum?
Yeah, the beauty of it is it's kind of like an operating system in the school. It's not a separate class, although we do have some supporting textbooks and curriculum that you can use to directly teach certain concepts. But the idea of the Leader in Me is we want to model for the students we expect from them. And so it's an inside-out approach. We focus on, we don't go in and teach the students directly ourselves. We empower the teachers to do that, and our focus is helping the teachers have a paradigm shift about what their role is. Teachers communicate the worth and potential of a child and help the child see that worth in themselves. And that's what really the Leader in Me is all about. So it's a ubiquitous process in the school. You don't have to have separate time. You need to have some upfront investment, a couple days of training to launch it in your school. But after that, we'll coach the school, and it's an ongoing
And it works
process.
on top of whatever other curriculum you might have.
Oh, yeah. We have IB schools,
yeah,
Cambridge schools,
everything.
Oxford, everyone. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting. Thank you. Okay, so my next question is about digital assessments. There's been a lot of talk about digital assessments and how they can, they can help, assessments be more inclusive and to offer, children sort of equitable opportunities to, to really demonstrate their knowledge. So I was wondering, and I think predominantly targeted towards, the educationists in the panel. Can you talk a little bit about how digital assessments, in fact, let me do this. I just realized that we haven't spoken to our AI avatar yet. So I'm going to put her on the spot right now and see how she does with this one. So, and then we can maybe get comments from you guys about what you think. So Sarah, can you let me know how you feel digital assessments have helped, assessments become more inclusive and equitable? And if you can give me 5 ways in which they've done that, that would be great.
Digital assessments have certainly made evaluations more flexible and accessible, allowing for personalized learning paths and immediate feedback. Would you like more specifics? Digital assessments allow for varied question types and personalized pacing. They can also include assistive technology for students with special needs. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Sarah, can you maybe tell me 2 other ways in which they can help in that respect?
Sure.
The network is down.
Digital assessments offer real-time progress tracking, and they reduce geographical barriers, enabling remote learning. Aren't these advancements fascinating?
Oh, they're completely fascinating. Faisal, what do you think? I mean,
So
yeah.
I think my fellow panelists are better.
Is she about to take over the planet anytime soon?
That may happen in 10 years. Let's see. We'll see. No, hopefully we'll work with AI to create a better world. Look, all I can say is that digital assessments, I always sucked at online assessments, so I don't think I'm the best person to comment on this. So I'll give it to my fellow panelists on this one.
Bill, so I mean, what do you think about Sarah's response? And you know, there's a lot of talk about digital assessments. What is your view?
Well, I think she's actually correct. It's made it accessible to a lot of people, but I think there are parts of the world, and probably here in Pakistan, where there's not necessarily all the access to the digital technology to allow them to take assessments, depending on the schools and where you're at. And certainly in certain parts of the world, that's the case. So my question back would be, you know, how do we deal with those situations? We certainly, in what we do, we have digital assessments that we can use in the schools with the teachers and others, and it's powerful. I love the fact that you get immediate response. It can calculate it and respond, and you can do generative questions, right? Where, because you ask one question, it then figures out through AI the next question what it should be. So they're powerful, powerful tools. I think we're going to use them more, and they're going to help us. But accessibility is always an issue in some parts of the world.
Yeah, no, true. Jesse, this is like right up your alley, really. You know, in your capacity, can you tell us a little bit about what Cambridge University Press and Assessment is doing in the realm of digital assessments and how they're perhaps making assessments more equitable and, you know, just, well, yes, more equitable and accessible?
Absolutely. And I'd like to come back to what Sarah said as well, because I think she came up with some very clear responses, but they were also very generalized responses that she was speaking to. And she spoke about flexible and personalized, which is getting at kind of adaptive testing and progress monitoring. And I think those are things that we couldn't do on paper previously because we can't use machine learning and AI in order to respond to student responses. And so I think it's important to reflect on some of the pieces that she's bringing forward. When she talks about varied item types, we have the opportunity to do more distinct item types, like interactive development environments, coding, and equation monitoring and modeling and things like that we couldn't previously do on paper. So I think there's really important things that we can bring forward in digital assessment that we couldn't previously do on paper that model some of the things that we're seeing in technology. Additionally, we have the opportunity to better measure how students engage with items. So I'll bring up multiple choice questions as an example, because that's a reasonably straightforward one. We know that coloring in bubbles is often really hard for students, that they make errors and they have trouble tracking and keeping track of where they're at or where they're going on the paper. In a digital setting, you can make the entire item clickable. So you remove a lot of that cognitive load for them as they're moving forward. So for Cambridge, we're looking kind of at all of the above. We're looking at progress monitoring. So how do you track the student's understanding of the content throughout the entire course? We're looking at kind of summative assessment options. So how do we better measure what we're teaching students? So I'll use computer science as an example. Computer science is almost always taught on a computer, but for many years, computer science has then been measured on a paper-based assessment, which is in line with what's being taught in the classroom. So how do we create an assessment that aligns with what's occurring in the teaching and learning environment? So that goes back to that integrated development environment that I talk about. So how do we test coding to align with what the teachers are preparing, what you all are preparing in the classroom? So that's a really big key for us. And then finally, it's the space of how do we support teachers in that personalized experience? So going back to what Sarah was saying, how do we support that teaching and learning cycle? How do you have the information and data that you need to drive that teaching and learning forward and improve the overall performance of students? So that's a big key of what we're trying to bring. And I think the other space, to go back to Bill's point, we're very aware of the equity piece. And the fact that we are in 160 countries, so we know that not all of the places that we're at are going to have the same level of access. So we have to make sure that we provide optionality. So what we're bringing forward digitally, we're looking to make sure that it is comparable to what we have on paper. And I think that that's going to be really important in understanding the equity gaps that we have relative to technology.
Fair enough. And also, because, we're talking about AI in this conference, do you think that quite soon we may see a time when AI can be used for marking papers, sort of like subjective question marking? I'm sure that's something you guys must be looking at.
Yeah, we're actually piloting AI marking for some of our formative assessments. So some of our progress monitoring, our classroom-based assessments that teachers could use to see how that moves and how that looks. And what we're doing is we're keeping a human in the loop. So fundamentally, we have the AI scoring and then an examiner checking to see how close it is to the examiner marking. But fundamentally, we think that that's going to be a really key part to both scaling and increasing the speed of releasing results out to teachers if we can bring that forward. As I said, the first place will be for it to come forward in kind of our progress monitoring and our classroom-based assessments. And then the next will be for it to start supporting our summative assessments.
Okay, fantastic. And Dr. LaRock, so you're working with underprivileged communities, and there's often been people have objected to the fact that at times, assessments are designed in such a way that they're unfair to people that come from underprivileged communities. Do you find that in the realm of now digital assessments, we may see them becoming more equitable and balanced and more culturally sensitive and context sensitive?
Well, I think the issue of cultural sensitivity is a huge issue for any organization like ours, which is working globally. And it's not so much about assessments per se, but rather how questions are formed and whether the examples being used, the context, is relevant to the particular national context in which we might be working. As NIFTY's global work has expanded over the years, we certainly have found a greater need to adapt our assessments, both on paper and digitally, to be aligned with the particular cultural context in which we work, so that the assessments are valid and fair. But more broadly on the theme of digital assessments, we use them in several contexts that my fellow panelists have already mentioned, as point-in-time assessments during the delivery of a class, as knowledge-based assessments pre and post-course, so that students learning on hard measures of knowledge can be measured. And then we also have a situational assessment delivered digitally that actually aspires to measure the 8 domains of the entrepreneurial mindset that I was talking about earlier. So we believe that assessments can be used to measure progress along these domains, in addition to believing strongly that these creative domains and out-of-the-box domains can be taught as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so just going to swing back to the VC side of things for a second, Faisal here. So, even though you've been speaking about, we've all been speaking about the increasing use of 4G and cell phone penetration in Pakistan. You spoke about the tremendous opportunities available, but even now, Pakistan's tech ecosystem is underfunded, I would say. I mean, there are. I was just researching 110 tech unicorns in India, which are companies that are valued at $1 billion or above. I was pretty shocked to learn that, and I think there are none in Pakistan yet. So I'm wondering, why is that the case? What are the various reasons for that? Does some of it have to do with maybe the skill sets of our entrepreneurs? What are the other reasons? What can schools do to bridge that gap, in your opinion?
Sure. Yeah, so let's unpack that. There's a lot of layers within that.
Yeah.
So Pakistan and India, although it's the ultimate comparable, in terms of, for Pakistan, in terms of structures, of bureaucracy.
So can you repeat that? The what?
Pakistan and India are the ultimate comparables, like good comparables,
yeah,
in terms of the structure of society, bureaucracy, the former British colony and structures built by them, in terms of civil society. But we also have to realize that there's a lag effect in terms of how adoption has taken place, and there's several factors in that. So I would say that Pakistan today, for example, economically, is going through what India went through in 1991, where their population grew significantly, and then suddenly it turned into a consumption-based economy.
You're saying there's a 30-year lag effect in your...
Only when it comes to population growth, like quantum effect, right? So they're 1.5 billion, we're roughly 250 million. We've reached that critical mass where now we have to, as a nation, retool ourselves and not be a consumption-based economy and fulfill some of those lagging effects by domestic production and augmenting. So those are structural issues. So there's that longer-term gap there. Now in technology, we actually have about a 7-year gap. And that 7-year gap exists primarily because of the launch of 3G and 4G. So in India and the rest of the region, 3G and 4G launched in roughly 2006 and 2010. In Pakistan, we did our first auction of a 3G and 4G license. We did actually simultaneously in 2013-14. So therefore, adoption actually started in 2015. And so if you zoom back to, let's say, 2017, you barely had 60 million data users in the country. Today, that number sits at somewhat above 100 million. Now, just out of 250 million people, 100 million ends up being a pretty significant quantum because it's bigger than, for example, like almost equivalent to the population of Egypt, per se, right? So it's a huge opportunity. Now, and again, when I say there's a 7 to 10 year lag, so if you look at India, the quantum of growth in terms of unicorns started coming after the different layers of tech. So tech is moving along the same cycles of markets. So whether you look at what transpired in the last 10 years, when the S&P moves up, which is the US stock market, along with that, big tech in the US moves up, VC moves up, so do markets like crypto and real estate and multiple other markets. And then as there's a deflationary event, which is linked to US interest rates, as the US raises or cuts rates, you see those drops and gains. So in Pakistan's case, we're just in a cycle, maybe 3 cycles behind where India was. So we'll have our unicorns, and I don't think it's a skill set issue.
When money becomes cheap again.
Exactly. And my personal opinion, that's about to happen in April.
I don't think it's ever going to be as cheap as it was a couple of years ago.
Not as cheap as 2021.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
But it's coming in the next cycle, and we have to be prepared for it. But to answer your question,
And you think we're prepared for it? Are entrepreneurs skilled and competent enough now to attract that sort of foreign capital?
Absolutely. You have to think of it as an evolution. So out of 250 million people, we have enough talent. So Mudassir Sheikha, who is the co-founder of Careem and the CEO, he's Pakistani. He built the platform in UAE, but that's a $3.1 billion company. Zameen, EMPG Group, is a $1.2 billion company. I looked at all this analysis in terms of capability. We have the same, Pakistan's a mini India. In terms of skill sets, the cream of the crop is already there. They will build the unicorns. We just will have a smaller quantum based on sheer size. And obviously, there's some level of geopolitics and perception, which we have to rectify as well. So that'll play out as well.
Yeah. That small footnote at the end is quite important, actually.
Yes.
Thank you. No, that's great. I'm enthused to hear that you're so optimistic about the VC ecosystem in Pakistan, and of course you are. You're investing in it. I'm going to try to maybe make this the last question before we go to Q&A, if we have some questions, that is. But in a developing country context, I wonder, if we're talking about entrepreneurship training. We live in a country where, baseline levels of numeracy and literacy are not achieved by students, and just teaching them basic math and teaching them to read and write in their own language and English, which is increasingly a very important language in Pakistan, that is very difficult. So is it realistic to assume that you can cover that basic knowledge gap while also teaching students entrepreneurship? Or should entrepreneurship training take a back seat and core fundamental numeracy, literacy, and knowledge skills be focused on? So maybe, Bill, you can lend us your perspective on that. Is it really possible to do both at the same time when the base level is so low?
Well, other than the technology piece, which is difficult in those developing areas, I think it is possible. I think that's what we're trying to do with schools, and I think some of the other panelists are focusing on the same thing. Because it's an integrated approach. If you consider learning to be an entrepreneur is learning how to lead your own life and inspire others and learn these 21st century skills, these life skills, then they certainly can be taught with your academics, because that's what we do in Leader in Me schools all around the world. So, yeah, I think it's definitely something we can do and we need to do. I would say one of the best things I think for an entrepreneur, and it may not be possible in all of these developing countries, is for young people to find a mentor.
Like to find a what?
To find a mentor.
Yeah.
I mean, their success rate will go, and I think, yeah, we need mentors for these young people, and so that's something that we as educators might be able to do. Yeah.
And Dr. LaRocque, I mean, because you actually work with underprivileged communities, so I think you're well positioned to answer these questions. Is it, how easy or difficult is it to balance the two?
Is a very important way to teach literacy and numeracy. And you know, let's think about it. In developing a business plan and developing a business pitch, you are actually helping students cultivate their literacy skills. In coming up with the financial aspects of a business plan, you are helping students develop their numeracy and mathematics skills. I think personally that entrepreneurship education often resonates with students who have trouble in traditional classroom settings where they are taught literacy and numeracy in more traditional ways. Entrepreneurship is something that starts with a student and his or her own passion, and therefore it's a really exciting and relevant platform for students to develop the skills that they need to bring out their own passion into the world. So we think entrepreneurship education is a really important way and a different way to develop literacy and numeracy. But I'd also like to second what Bill just said about mentorship. Mentorship is a huge component of what we do at the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. And in our work around the world, both physically and digitally, we deploy volunteers from companies and volunteers from communities to serve as mentors, and that mentorship component is also a really important part of fostering a learning relationship between a young entrepreneur, a classroom, and the mentor. So I would like to just emphasize what has been said, because that is a key component and something, frankly, we think all entrepreneurs need.
Fantastic. I think let's move on to Q&A maybe. What are some tips for a 12-year-old to motivate him or her to start a business at this young age? Okay, well, does anyone want to have a crack at that?
So I think we, related to this question, what I'll say, especially because there's a lot of academics in the room, there's obviously people today that obviously they'll get motivated. Most young people today are able to think outside the box. They have access to our academic world, but they also have access to YouTube, and they're primarily online, and they're learning a lot of skill sets there. So I think one is to encourage entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs, is to hone in. If your children at home and teachers see there's a leaning towards entrepreneurship, reinforce it. That's the number one thing we can do today in the current education system. But as we evolve this education system, let's think about the 2030s. Gen Alpha is going to be an entirely different beast in terms of the way they're growing up. These kids were born with an iPad and a device. So their thought processes with platforms like Roblox are going to be very different. And I think their teachers and parents both have to figure out how to reinforce creativity and entrepreneurship from a young age. I mean, my two daughters already, one wants to be a YouTube star, and the other one wants to be something similar on TikTok and a filmmaker. And I'm encouraging it also. It's like they'll figure it out later on.
I mean, as a matter of fact, I would say that, they all want to already be entrepreneurs. They're doing entrepreneurship on Roblox already. They're doing their little businesses, and they've got their jobs going on. They kind of, in the metaverse, are already engaged in activities that we would never have been engaged in when we were that age. So I think that's there. Fantastic. Can we, there was a second question which I think someone for no reason skipped. Yeah. I think Dr. Jesse, maybe I will address this one to you. Can you provide successful examples of promoting inclusivity through digital assessments that can be replicated in Pakistan?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that I would recommend that the teachers really kind of consider is something known as the universal design for learning principles. That can be a really effective way of how you look at accessibility, not just in digital assessment, but in assessment more broadly, as well as engaging with accessibility in the classroom. But I think some of the easy, more straightforward ones are things like text to speech that can be embedded within the platform and used. I think that goes back to the question that we were having earlier around students that are struggling with reading and are having difficulty with that. That doesn't mean that they won't know the content. So how can you support them to answer questions directly around the content? So I think that is as the next step for us. If we want them to truly be able to just answer a mathematics content, but we don't want them struggling directly with the reading piece, the text-to-speech can be a really strong ally for us. So I think that's a really good example that can be brought forward, and you can use that just with the Google Chrome browser. That's a setting that you can set up for your students on the Google Chrome as a teacher to be able to bring forward. So I think those are reasonably easy pieces for you to use. I think other things to consider in that space is with digital is to try to understand what it is that you're trying to measure and assess. And again, it goes back to, if you're measuring reading, be sure that you're measuring reading within that space. If you're trying to measure something other than reading, try to limit the amount of reading that students are having to do and try to support that from an accessibility space. So that's where things like text to speech or speech to text can come into play to support. There's also other AI activities that you can do to really support students around understanding what the meaning is of AI and kind of using ChatGPT to get the sense of problem solving and other pieces that come forward. But I would really recommend, sorry.
No, sorry. No, I thought, please go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that the Universal Design Learning Principles, it's CAS.org, really gives a good example of how to apply these in a direct fashion to both the classroom environment as well as the overall assessment design.
Is there an online resource where one can go and learn more about these universal design principles?
Yes, so CAS.org, and then Cambridge. If you go to Cambridge One, there's also quite a bit of information on there around how we've applied it to kind of all of our assessments, and then how we're learning and using it for our digital assessments as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So I will actually address our next question to Sarah, I think, and then we can take it from there. So Sarah, can you give me 3 ethical considerations that entrepreneurs should have when launching a new business?
Yes. How can I help you further?
Yes. Sorry, guys. Let's try that again.
Great. Please proceed with your next question, or how else I can assist you today.
Yes. Sarah, what ethical considerations should entrepreneurs keep in mind when starting or running their business?
Entrepreneurs should prioritize transparency, uphold data privacy, and ensure fair trade practices. Sustainability is also a key consideration. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Vessel, what's your opinion on that?
No, so agreed. It's spot on. I think especially in Pakistan, one of the things that we look for in entrepreneurs as well and startup founders is integrity. I think I'd put that at the top of one of the measurement skill sets, that we do KYC, try to get background checks done, speak to people they've previously worked with. So transparency, also upholding data privacy, and in general having a higher ethical compass is very important, because you're building for the next generation. And for us, we're also trusting you with investor capital. So it's very important for us that things play out in a solid manner.
All right, fantastic. Is that our last question, possibly? How do policies of countries impact entrepreneurs? Would anyone like to lend their perspectives on this from the countries that they've come from? What sort of policies, let's say, maybe reframe it, what kind of policies can the government have to promote entrepreneurship? Does anyone want to have a crack at that?
I could take a crack at that.
Sure.
Well, I'm coming to you from the U.S. right now, where, of course, we have a 50-state system. And I will tell you that state policies, as well as national policies, have a dramatic impact on how entrepreneurship education is facilitated. In states like Florida, for example, where leaders over time have made explicit decisions to invest in entrepreneurship education, to make space in the school day for such classes, and to actually tie it to a certification architecture where students can take entrepreneurship classes and take certification tests to have their mastery recognized. It's no surprise that in a regime like that, an organization like the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship is doing much, much more work. And there are key laws at the national level in the US and other nations, particularly having to do with facilitating career and technical education, of which entrepreneurship is a part. So, for example, in many schools, many countries around the world, it's quite common for there to be special funding to encourage people to be trained in a particular trade. Entrepreneurship can also be coupled in a policy way in schools like that, so that students are not only learning a trade or hands-on skill, but can utilize that skill not to be an employee of somebody else, but to be an entrepreneur, such as a mechanic or an HVAC repair person or an electrician. You can be those things, but you can be a person who owns a business doing those things. And that's where policy can come in to create space and funding for the entrepreneurship aspect to be coupled with that.
Okay. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're just about out of time. There are 20 seconds left there, but this has been a fascinating panel for me. I think I do truly personally believe that Pakistan is on the cusp of an explosion in entrepreneurship, and I do think that we're going to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of entrepreneurs and startups. I think we have all the right ingredients in place, and we shall see that soon, hopefully. And as far as educational institutions are concerned, like Beacon House, we're committed to working with, some of the leading experts and organizations in the world, working on entrepreneurship to provide whatever scaffolding we can, which is why we have these conferences. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for providing your tremendous insights to us. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to our audience for being part of this panel and attending. Thank you.